we cha ko mo ku we cha ke lor we ko ke be ben ko ke be dai ku ba ka ping ni yo ko la an mo bi da na ngo jam yen bu ku loy won ran tung de ko kwon ko ni wok to ne South Sudan ni yemen ka bi wo jam tin e biag da por kuran ran che lui ka na koch a lo na biag da wed ni ali ka wed koch ku bu koch bu ke wel ni ku bu ka nyop wan ka cheng ku kai da pyo cha ne che school la che lo ya che pyo ni school secondary school ku je la primary kuna war che ba che aka che ya ka che lo ya che be we le ma chi ba che jot ku tin kok pe fa ka ne yen ke yen ke bi wala tin yemen we ba ka tie we ko ke be ben ku ko ke be dai ku ba ka ping ba ka ram kana wo ka ten ni tv fa wer de jamda abataw etena fa tam ke baka lo share ku yen ga ba bay an be dit aba taw ku na ci dit ku ci tok ka ba bay lo ke share wo ci bagaw eran wer rin ke ga chol den ne tong de ke Daniel yin ka chola ya short form of it fa ka yen tam ke baka lo share ku an be dit ka ba taw ku wo go bla twen ku ci bagaw we cha ga lor ku we cha ke mot tam ke baka ben ku lo ke share we cha ga mot thank you. Welcome, Dan.
Hello, I'm missionary Dan Janzen.
Hang,
Um,
hang on. Hang on. We cha ke mot ku we cha ke lor we ko ke be ben lo ke video lo ke share kan na bia jam tie ki ke re jam de bai fa we te ka ba ke jo pian queer wo bi jam ni english ni yo kole ke bu ku lo ma rani chol den yen ka ba nyod we ki nga ku ba ge kene ba ke jo yo lo ke video lo ke share ku bi ko bi ke yo na chi ko ku chi ke yo nga bi jo la ping de we cha ka lor ku we cha ke mot uh, back to everyone. Thank you for coming and thank you for the time you have taken out of your busy schedule to come and join us. I welcome everyone. Please share the video and let's move from here. Here is Dan Janzen. He's a missionary to South Sudan. The rest, he will talk about his experience in the country and the work that he did. He's he went there for one mission, and now he's doing more than he was expecting. Now connected and connecting with other communities across South Sudan. Like I mentioned earlier, he helped in Bor, in Jonglei area, in Pibor, in Kapoita, Yei, Rumbek, and many other places in South Sudan. So we are a connected community, and someone who comes with intention to help people has always a place to go to and has a lot to deliver to the people that are in need. So now that our people are in IDP's camp, and Dan is the agriculture major. He did a lot of work here in the United States before his missionary work to South Sudan. So he has experience. Even I overstated that he's educator at other part, but what he's doing now, he's helping training people on the agriculture sector. So please welcome Dan, and I ask you to please share the video and let's listen to him, what he has to say and his observation, his experience in the country of South Sudan. Being from the West, going there is such a experience, and we are very grateful to have him. Dan, welcome.
Thank you. Well, I should say, we Chakamuth and we Chukamuth, both, because it's not just me, it's my wife and I that are here.
Okay.
And my wife's name is Teresa, and we both work here at a cross, and here in Juba. But like you were saying, I do a lot of traveling. Actually, I haven't been to Pibor yet, but I've been to places that are mentioned there. I've been to Boma. While a lot of different places doing training, even up into Nuba Mountains, and to the refugee camps in northern Uganda, and so there's just so many things to talk about, but really want to thank you for this opportunity to be here with you and talking to the diaspora across the North America, maybe even the diaspora. And I don't know, do we have diaspora in Australia linking in here too, or not? But I know the diaspora is so many places, and I've visited so many of you in the United States as well, to New York, to Des Moines, to Washington D.C., to Louisville, Kentucky, to Grand Rapids, where I have a home base. I've been to many of you and spoken at some of your associations scattered throughout the country, and generally with a message that we really want to help ourselves, Sudanese family, friends, to develop and develop appropriately in a way that doesn't create dependency and entitlement, and also to relieve the burden of supporting family members across in not only in our own immediately family members, but also the family members of those that are away from their extended families. And there's just so many needs in South Sudan. How do we strategically help meet those needs without creating dependency and entitlement? That's a big issue, and one we can kind of gather and wrap our brains around and think together as a team. How do we do that? How do we do it in a godly way that shows mercy and grace, and bestows a blessing upon our extended families? So if given the opportunity to speak here, which I have been, I really want to emphasize that there are approaches to agriculture here, simple approaches that can increase income, and these management practices, I'm going to call them best management practices, Sometimes they're not obvious, and that's why we do some training, and we help people figure out how do we increase our income, how do we get our youth involved in agriculture. We're losing our youth here in South Sudan. They it's difficult for a youth to think about picking up a hoe, or a djembe, or melota, wherever the local language is being used. But um, it's kind of seen as a backwards thing, and the youth oftentimes aren't interested too much in agriculture. But we can change that. We can actually engage the youth in agriculture, engage them in ways where we're looking at increasing our income per hour, where we are praising them for using their math skills, for helping determine what crops are most income producing per hour. And this after you learn the multiplication, division, tables, and you learn how to divide. It's easy to divide your hours that you've worked on a particular crop, or you've used for a method you're experimenting with, or an improved method, and see how it compares to other crops, other methods. And that is a foundational principle of management, and one thing that I emphasize quite a bit here in South Sudan. And then also, we can talk a little bit more about just rooting out lies, things that in our culture, and we all have them in our Western culture, um, and our South Sudanese culture. We all have these things that hold us back, that cause us to have a fatalistic approach to things, cause us not to move into an area of excellence in every area of our life, holistically. And these are other things that we can talk about in this time, because there are things that are setting us back, holding us back from our full potential, and setting us back from serving one another with excellence, and ministering to the needs of other people, to blessing other people with maximal blessing. These are the things that we can identify in the culture that we might see, when we think, oh, that doesn't look quite right. That doesn't produce peace. That's not producing harmony. That doesn't look like God's will. That doesn't produce human flourishing. We need to ask the question, why? And maybe we have to ask it several times, why we are doing things a certain way, and then reflect on that and say, what can we study that might lead us in a different direction? What can we gain from God's word that might lead us in a different direction?
Dan, to retract a bit, what took you to
Mhm.
South Sudan in the first place?
Sure. Well, many of you might know a man named David Bowman. David Bowman had just um, when I lived in the Grand Rapids area before I moved to South Sudan, David was influential in my life, and he directed me toward meeting the South Sudanese diaspora in Grand Rapids, and talked to me about a hospital that he had. He and a group of people in South Sudan had raised money and gone over and built in Kirkuk, um, um, South Sudan, and so I got involved on the board, and then eventually, when I became a board member, they asked me, okay, when are you going? And so we said, oh, is this as soon as we can? And of course, because we didn't want to disappoint, and so, but when we got here, for my wife, someone had told her when she'd been there just about a week and a half, and they and uh, someone else was leaving, and they talked to her and says, "You look like you've been here a long time," and that was kind of a compliment for her, and she felt, well, okay, maybe I belong here. People think that I already have been here a long time, and for me, I just saw the opportunities, just a little bit of help. And teamwork, and working with the local people might make a big difference. And so being strategic in my life is something really important. So that's why we moved in 2016. And so that's a little background as to how we got here in South Sudan. But we've had
So
to change mission agencies I mean, two times. So we went on a third mission agency because the mission agencies keep telling us, oh, it's too dangerous for us to be there. So they pull us out,
mhm.
and then we change agencies to go back.
So you mentioned Cook. You live in Cook, and you went for that particular church. You built the church. Was the
Yes.
school part of the project that you were working on?
We started a primary school and a secondary school, and we won't take all the credit because we had a team member with us, Samuel Goldboot, um, who helped us out. Actually, he actually went over it ahead of us to start the primary school, and we came and we started the secondary school. It was hit the ground running situation. After we arrived, we had the school opened in like a month and a half after we arrived, and so that was through the Chris when we arrived just before the Christmas holidays, and so even that made it more difficult. But we persevered. We had the school open for a year, and then our mission agency pulled us out, and so we moved to Juba and started working with the cross, and that's where we're at right now.
So is the school still operating, or did the school get closed
The
because of?
primary the primary part of the school still operating. The secondary school was closed due to the lack of funding when the other organization that we were working with pulled out, and they took the funding with them. So it really leads us to double down on how do we fund things locally. That's a big question, and that's something that I would like to work with everyone on, and has become a big focus, is how can these rich resources be stewarded with excellence. The rich resources of South Sudan, one of the most blessed countries in the world in terms of resources and human resources and spiritual resources, they're all here. And how do we manage those with excellence so that we can maximize our blessing? How we can move forward, not I tell people this, we don't want to move forward sustainably, we want to move forward rapidly. We want to set our goals high, not just to maintain a status quo of oh, this is the best we can do is to just have subsistence or just be sustainable. Let's set our goals high, and we can with South Sudan. That's the beauty of South Sudan, is that you can set your goals high, you can achieve a lot, and you can have a huge impact on the future of the country if we have the right methodologies, and we understand that we need a Christian worldview. We understand how to bless other people with a Bible study that leads to a Christian worldview.
Uh, Now you went there for the uh, you went there for that mission work. Part of the project was pulled out because part of the organization left, and you were there. So how did you get involved with training people in the agriculture?
Well, at first I was training people in the Boer and Cook area, and then occasionally went out and trained people other areas. So I started this even in 2012. When I first went, I was training, and I worked with Texas A&M and uh, the uh, what's it called? The Jungle Eye initiative, and I did some training there in Boer. And I've also done godly governance and administration training, teaching people about societal values and government policy, how to found it on the Bible. And then I've kind of continued in that vein when I switched over to a cross. I just expanded that to not only training students and occasionally training other people. Now I'm pretty much full time working with a ministry partner named Joseph Noel um,
Mhm.
and from CMS Africa, and we're every week. Sometimes we're training. Sometimes we miss a week because we're doing some other types of activities. But we have a whole team now that goes and does one training after another, and it might be of interest to the diaspora to invite us someplace and see when we can arrange to come to an area which maybe they're from, or an area what they've recognized as a tremendous need. So. Um, it was a lot of time spent working with a smaller group of high school students, and now I travel all over the country doing Christian worldview and agricultural training with the uh, and linked up with Across and CMS Africa together. We're using DNA Disciple Nation Alliance materials for training in Christian worldview. And so I do more of the agricultural training in Joseph Noel and and another lady named Peace. Um, they do trainings in different areas. It depends on who's on my team at the time. We cover savings groups, agricultural development, Christian worldview, um, cooperatives, um, and um, pretty much, fruit tree, timber tree, market gardening. Those are some of our focal points, or focal areas. And even if you look at my shirt,
Mhm.
you'll see plant your crops, then build your house, Proverbs 24:27. So we go with that theme all the time. We first need to secure our income, and then we want to uh, put put things into maybe the needs that we have. We put those aside, um, or wants we have. We put those aside, and we focus on how do we make sure that we have our income coming in first, and then the things that make us comfortable, we can add those things on later. There's a lot of self-sacrifice when you first start working in South Sudan,
Mhm.
delayed gratification, and it's something that we need to really um, hone down on, because it's what my ancestors did. They delayed and they saved. They delayed their comfort level. It wasn't they kept it down fairly low, and didn't buy the extra things that they thought they wanted. Just the bare essentials until they had a big enough savings to invest in their business, or and things that might make them a little more comfortable, at home. So that's a big difference, I think, here in Africa, is this that uh, focus on savings. That has to become entrenched in the culture if South
Mhm.
Sudan is going to move forward, because it's out of savings, not out of NGO money, or government money, or government investment, or NGO investment, that's going to properly bring us out of a state of poverty.
With your experience and the poverty that people are in, with a
Hmm.
lot of challenges in the country,
Hmm.
as you can see in Mangala, I believe you've been there.
Yes.
There
Hmm.
are a lot of issues going on. Land, the other people have left their home because of the water floods, and they're
Hmm.
now asking the other counties or other states to host them. How can we make agriculture in those places cost effective?
The thing that I think is really, really important is to figure out what we can do with what we have on hand. And so these host communities, particularly the two host communities in Mongala, have been very good to the communities that have come that direction because of the flooding, and the continued flooding. We don't know exactly when this flooding is going to end, how successful the dike construction is going to be at holding back the water, and whether the water will even come from the eastern side, and and come up to the dike and not be able to get through. These types of things are unpredictable, and so we now know that people might be in Mongolia. They might be there for some time. So we have to settle in, and we have to create really good relationships. We have to focus on how does the IDPs from Mongolia, how do they maximally bless the host communities? How does the host community maximally bless the IDPs? And out of this seeking, um, um, selfless seeking the blessing of others and maximizing the opportunities, I think we can really move forward and demonstrate to the world how our Christian community can function, and how all the numbers of people can be a maximum blessing to one another. And so we need excellence in leadership. And so we teach leadership, and we teach methodologies or systems where IDPs and host community can work together. And some of those systems are just real simple systems that are copying things from the West. Like we have an agreement called a crop share agreement. And the crop share agreement is where the host community may give the IDPs a piece of land, and that piece of land then, particularly if it's an important piece of land, maybe on the Nile or something where it has access to water, where you can grow vegetables for a market garden, maybe the agreement could go something like 5, 10, 15, or 20, or even maybe up to 30% of the proceeds or the crop maybe going to the host community. If you've got a really good spot along the Nile, that's a treasure, because you can irrigate from the Nile. And there's lots of treadle pumps that have been distributed by CRS that could be brought down from the bore area. People can fix those up, and treadle pump water out of the Nile. And the diaspora, maybe they will contribute something to some diesel or petrol powered pumps to make it easier possibly. And I've seen large amounts of money being raised for boreholes and different things. There's a tremendous need, but we've got to use the money very strategically. And there's a lot of donor fatigue among the international community. And I'm sure it's difficult to keep meeting the demands of their family and friends in South Sudan. So let's do it together. Let's work together as a team and do it strategically. And let's talk about all these different potential agreements that can be done between the host community and the refugee community, so that we're not trying to eke out a living on a very small piece of ground, and we're not trying to grow things without irrigation water, which very much limits you to things like sorghum, groundnuts, simsim, on rain-fed agriculture, which is fine. But if we can get irrigation water, then we can take those products to the market, bring back money, and buy staple goods, staple foods like beans and sorghum or rice, grains, flour, those types of things. Those things can be purchased from the market because they're more economically grown with tractors on a very large area, where the tractors in other areas will have not only plowing equipment but drilling equipment and all the things that go with that. So growing vegetables is a very good match for the location there near the Nile, and it's a very good match for the nearness of the market, being like hour and a half away to the Juba market, and also we even go north to the Boer market. Those are all possibilities with market gardening, and things that people should be doing when they have a small amount of land, and they just have their djembes or melotas or their hoes, um, and that's the type of agriculture that they're doing. And we can also introduce herbicide spraying techniques. Say for Roundup, you can spray a piece of ground, make a planting hole,
Mhm.
put some seeds in there, or put a transplant in there, and then you're not necessarily digging all the ground, which saves time. Particularly if you can get a larger piece of a ground there near where they're settled in the Mongla area.
So, as you have seen, some of the areas are highly dry and people are squeezed into the camp, like IDP camp Mangala is one
Mhm.
example in the country.
Mhm.
How far and how comfortable is the host community with the IDPs?
Um, Boy, you know,
Let me retract
I,
that a bit.
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Let me retract. So,
Sure.
you have been training people, and these
Yes,
people might have been from the IDP camp, and some are from the host community.
right, exactly. Okay, good.
So these people, when you bring them together, and as you were explaining earlier, that mutual agreement and the work that can be done both, they can have a share of what they can get because
Yes,
they are the host community, and these people are just there for a time being, not knowing when they're going to leave or when the
right.
water is going to descend. So, how comfortable are these people in the classes that you offer and explaining this kind of regulation and some sort of
Mhm.
rules and how they can
Mhm.
help and bless each other?
Well, I really need to gauge that question through further work and through further teamwork. This is what we're shooting for, but I don't know how it's going to evolve, and
Mhm.
and I didn't sense any negative reaction to the various types of agreements that nobody came up and said, I don't like that. I think that would be exploitation if we had to pay something to use the land. Um, Nobody came back with that kind of reaction. There was an openness on both sides.
Mhm.
I'm sure there's going to be issues moving forward, and but we've got to try. We've got to set a tone of how do we maximize the blessing to one another.
Mhm.
When you look at the Bible, you'll find that um, whenever there was a issue where people weren't following God, God oftentimes said, "Okay, your natural consequences of what you're doing is going to reduce your numbers. You're going to be oppressed within or without by sin or by an outside people group." And so their numbers were reduced by their natural consequences. And then when they did what was right, their numbers increased. And so increasing numbers in an area is a blessing. The infrastructure is lower. The school systems are easier to do when people are gathered together in a large group. The construction of roads, the construction of an access to boreholes and water is easier. There's a huge amount of blessing to people being together. So how do we maximize that? How do we organize so that all the land is used in that area and not just some of it? And how can we use it maximally? How can we get the irrigation water there? And this is where the diaspora community, I think, can really step in, is in the access to irrigation water, because that is a little bit expensive, but the potential is high. Right now in the Juba market, most of the vegetables are coming from Uganda. There's some local production, but there's no reason why these vegetables can't come from Angola and have a huge vegetable area there. And what we can't irrigate, then we put in our sorghum and our simsim and our ground nuts and things like that, which also can be marketed, but they don't bring as high income per hour. That's the issue with some of those crops is the income per hour. You need a bigger piece of ground to get enough income per hour to thrive.
Mhm.
We don't want small plots that are essentially end up being what I call starvation plots, or plots where your dependence on outside organizations has to be there in order to survive.
Correct me if I haven't heard this right. You're saying that a lot of vegetables and that are being sold are coming from Uganda or other countries, and there's very little being produced in the country. So, how important is the farming, and what kind of vegetables uh,
Well,
would you
that's
recommend?
a that's a good question, and I think it'll take some experimentation on that particular soil. But what I found here in South Sudan, pretty much nearly all the vegetables um, can be grown here. Some vegetables that we grow in the West, they don't do as well in the heat. But access to water, particularly during the rainy season when there's a lot of cloudy weather, that changes things. And so vegetables that couldn't normally be grown, they can be grown in that environment. Um, and so water is a critical component. There's some vegetables that can survive with on rain fed sometimes, and sometimes they don't, and so it's a little risky to try to grow them rain fed. The two that I would try rain fed is eggplant and okra, because
Mhm.
they're a little more tolerant of water stress. But if
Mhm.
we're going to do that, I tell people in my training, I tell them, okay, we've got to put organic matter down in the ground.
Mhm.
And we've got to, in the planting hole, we've got to use a heavy layer of mulch. The good thing is that there's grass grows everywhere, and you can cut that grass and use it for mulch. It's particularly important for tomato production. And so any number of vegetables can be grown there, pretty much the whole range of vegetables. But there's certain ones that need water. And pumpkins, I've got a technique for growing pumpkins in the receding water, like in October or September, October, November. Those time periods, there's the water's receding. You don't have to worry about it coming back up, and so you can actually grow things right along the edge of any water body and keep those vines going down, and rerouting those vines on the edge of the water is one technique that we're going to be trying more extensively. So there are a lot of opportunities, even if you don't have irrigation, but you have um, ability to carry water from a borehole or from the Nile, and you have a lot of mulch and you have a lot of organic matter in the planting hole, um, and you're adding additional fertilizer. I have some techniques for fertilizer
Mhm.
addition that don't even require us to buy fertilizer, but we can keep our fertility up at this maximum level. And so those are all things we can use and put in our training.
With with this kind of farming, uh, as a group here in the United States, we have this department who is in charge of this project we're trying to help with. So tomorrow
Mhm.
night, you spoke with some of the people. Before we had somebody, and it still is there, Dow from Elijah from
Yes,
Australia. He was
yes.
helping people differently. He has people, for instance, if I have a brother or a sister
Mhm.
or an uncle
Mhm.
that I want to help, I can pay
Mhm.
$100, and he's going to send the team to go and clear the land, and then the land is left with him to continue from there. That's
Yeah,
individual. But in the setting of individual farming and group farming, what do you recommend in this case?
sure. Well, I think we need to form. groups, God love groups, or savings groups, or groups, cooperative groups, and have people with different skills and expertises work with one another. And it sounds strange that people may be able to create some small savings, but it's possible. Even in a refugee or a IDP camp, people can generate some small amounts of savings and then reinvest as a group in something, say for irrigation, or maybe the diaspora could create a matching fund for djembes and herbicide spraying and equipment. Um, Sprayer doesn't cost that much. It can substitute for a tractor on a smaller scale, and for irrigation equipment, treadle pumps, powered pumps, those types of things. So to teach people how to form a savings group is a big deal. It can make a big difference because whenever somebody has a little bit of money, we all want to help each other,
Mhm.
and so sometimes it's like a demanded of a person if if they think someone thinks they have a little extra money. But when you have a savings group, then all those demands from other people, they're repelled to some degree based on the collective initiative of the people saying, no, we're saving this money because when we save this money, we can have some power. We're empowered to do something extraordinary that's not normally done, and to buy a treadle pump, to buy and we can go to different groups and say, can you match the funding with us?
Mhm.
Or even if we had this, then we could do this, and we've already raised this amount of money locally. Those types of excellences can be done if we work together. We train people how to do this. How do you take a box, a metal box, and put three locks on it, and then have teach the people how to have a group that sets aside money each week or each month, and then brings that money together to loan out to the rest of the group. Those are empowering types of things. Those are things that what you're learning in the IDP camp can go and empower people when they return to their ancestral homelands where they've been farming all these years. And so those are the things we're focusing on to help people, and just the skills of growing vegetables is another focal point. And then also, like I was saying earlier, what are the well, how do we identify what's holding us back? What's
Mhm.
producing a fatalistic approach to things, like we're always going to be poor. We always need to continue with these types of farming methods that don't bring much income. Um,
Mhm.
we can break out of the box and do something different and do something of excellence that increases the income, increases our potential to bless other people.
What is exactly is the potential crops that can bring income in this market? Because our people used to farming sorghum, corn, or maize, very little that they cannot sell much of it just for food.
Yeah.
What? Yeah.
Oh, just an aside. I know Elijah Dow that had the program for the Jungle Life Food Initiative that brought so much blessing to East area and um, so his initiative was really good, and there was quite an extensive planting of sorghum, in particular with that program. I want to complement what he's doing and also teach people how to grow vegetables. So I
Hmm.
don't want to suppress the production of sorghum so much as teach people an additional skill, offer them a different opportunity that might fit wherever they have irrigation water. And those crops that can be grown when you have irrigation water are tomatoes, green peppers or red peppers, um, and watermelons or shamam or muskmelon cantaloupe, um, and um, uh, zucchini, or pumpkins, or greens, or leafy vegetables such as sukuma wiki, or what we call kale in the West,
Right.
collards, um, cabbage. Uh, let's see, um, rocket or arugula or
Lettuce.
girgir. Um, yeah, lettuce is a tough one. I wouldn't
Mm.
recommend lettuce generally speaking, unless you have like a shade house or something. I've
I
only
see.
seen it grown in a shade house with the Koreans in the Bor area, with under pretty heavy shade. So that one is tough
Mm.
unless you're under some kind of shade. And I wouldn't generally recommend it because you're going to put a lot of money into that. But things that tolerate the heat, like girgir, or regula, or kudra. Those things tolerate the heat in their leafy vegetables. In fact, what we
Mm-hmm.
really need to be talking to people about too is is going and collecting all of that kudra that comes up all over the place, all over that area. We need massive quantities. We should be filling trucks and trucks and trucks with dried kudra and bringing them back to the IDP area.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone ought to add a little bit of kudra to every meal, or any other leafy wandering Jew, even if people can identify what it is. That's a great addition to the nutrition. So nutrition is something that's reachable. What I tell people, I tell them, eat the weeds and take the vegetables to the market. Now that's a delayed
Same.
gratification,
Mm-hmm.
self-sacrifice system
So
that will put more money into savings so that you can actually buy these different things you need: more djembes, more herbicide sprayers, that can substitute for a tractor, more irrigation, types of equipment, the treadle pumps and the powered machines. Um, we can actually, if we make some of these sacrifices and eat a lot of the local greens that just grow in the wild, you'll take almost all your vegetables to the market. And we can learn how to eat some of the parts of the vegetable that don't go to the market. The number twos, that taste just as good. And crazy as it seems, I've even experimented with this, eating the outer leaves of the cabbage if they're shredded up well enough. They're
mm-hmm.
very nutritious, and they're actually, the outer leaves are more nutritious than the inner leaves. They have more nutrition in them. So these are kinds of things that sound crazy, and I'm a crazy Kawaja or whatever. Sometimes they call me that. But we have to think, how can we get by with less so we can put more in the savings? That is an essential skill, and it requires a tremendous amount of discipline. You don't just eat what your favorite things to eat at first until you, like I was saying here, until you plant your crops first and then build your house. Proverbs 24:27. The comfortable things you want, um, don't get those right off the bat. Save money, and then later you'll have them.
Great, great. Thank you so much. Do you have any example of the product of your training, things that you have seen that becomes people who become successful, or advice that you've give people and they went and did what you trained them to do? Do you have an example of any of that?
Sure, yes, we've worked with a lot of groups, and many of them have started savings groups. And I'm always surprised when they say we've saved so much money, and they just started their group, and it's like, oh, you haven't had a group very long, and you've saved that much money already. Like within within a couple months, they say, "Oh yeah, we've got $100 already." It's amazing what people can save when it and it's exciting because they can see the power of savings. And also, I've had people stand up in my training and say something like, "I didn't save," and they would take off their scarf, and they'd say, and their hair would be shaven, and say, "I didn't save, but and I spent all my money on Christmas presents, and my daughter died because I went to the I couldn't go to the doctor to treat my daughter." And these types of testimonies, and seeing people's the light bulbs click on when people say, "Oh, savings, that's a really powerful thing," and this is what happened because I didn't save. And then seeing what happens when people do save, anything becomes possible when you're saving money. So there's lots of examples. I don't have time to go into all of them,
Yeah, yeah.
but but it's really tremendous what I see happening out there, from people implementing the training. Now, oftentimes the training, if I don't have someone to communicate with afterwards, sometimes
Hmm.
things fall away, and people don't implement, and they just go on to the next NGO training, and they get a big huge pile of certificates, big pile of certificates from all the different trainings they've been to, and it's like they want the certificates and they don't want the knowledge, and they don't want to apply the knowledge. And so we have to push back and say we're going to apply this knowledge. We're not just going to get another certificate from another training, or
Hmm.
be fed again in another training program, or sitting fees, or transportation fees, anything. Like when someone comes to train you, it's a blessing. Put it into practice and maximally implement it, and it takes some self-sacrifice and discipline to do that.
So you recommend that they maximize their um, knowledge from the training by going out and do these kind of work.
Yes, yes. And then when we've seen that happen, people are blessed, and they're empowered, and they're excited. You can see the difference in their lives when they're excited about that, and they're saying nothing really can hold us back anymore. And we know that I haven't mentioned the security issue, but there's a lot of insecurity here in South Sudan. But
Yeah.
I'm telling people too that don't go without hope, because we can work with you on even the security issue. We can come and help people learn how to train a dog. Train a dog. A well-trained dog can
Hmm.
exclude thieves and grazing animals from the garden area.
Hmm.
And that's a huge problem there. But there are solutions to these things, and
Totally.
we must not think that we have a reason not to do something just because we don't know the answer. The answers are there. God's given us the answers, and we have the resources to do it. He's given us a wonderful intellect, to tackle that.
Thank you, Dan. I'm impressed with the time you spend with people and the education you're giving to people, and confident not only in the agriculture training, but these other leadership training,
Mhm.
and at the same time in the training of being a missionary, of doing God's work. All of
Right,
this is God's work in many
right.
ways.
It
Uh,
is definitely.
you, yeah, we've met now, and we have people that are going to interact with you. You may
Hmm.
help them, and they will
Hmm.
help you uh, in both ways. Here in the West,
Yes,
our role and our duty is to help our people to help themselves. We
right,
cannot
exactly, exactly.
we cannot push and get everything done by ourselves. We are in so much distance, and these
Right.
people are over there struggling. If there is anything that will ease or lift this struggle from them, that's what we want. And
Exactly.
tomorrow you will be back with the group of
Yes,
elders,
yes,
and the IDP chairman, Mr.
right.
Atem. You guys are coming back with the plan
Yes,
and what we have to hear with us, and we will put this together to make it work. Sorry for the internet interference. Sorry guys, internet is not cooperative sometime in South Sudan. If nale local twing zede ka boko tiok wo tol ben to the talk which in 1 hour enough time ku dan che long de ka chi yen wo ka bangot ka be ben mia fa koi ke nong ni jame e ke junubin koi to na kemik ku particularly koi ke cholti ke ka loy wo ke show kan sultan ku banyatem a be ben mia ku kek a be ngot ke be wet chi dan chi lwel man a big be beri ete bi wo koi ko kwantin ku be nga de ke be rot coin yetok yen ka yokutin so a che kriye ben ayen battery ya chito fa chinte buku be loyen a buku pol wiya ku wog mia wo bungot ko wo yo we ko chi ben we chakale la ke ko we dule ku wo be longda a buku tem buku loy kene cake project agriculture yen kwen manyang chul chuk ato kwer ku loyde abe abroad loy chike che luel ku chike chi maktab chi loy ni United States ten fa togde de tui yene bijolo ya kre ko ke tawde ti fa show kan yene ka loy ku ran kan chaka tinwen anang master in agriculture ku ke ko jaye ka pyo lo ne le yene pe ku ka chika ju ja chi ke lo loy ka chen la ni le yen so loy ke loy de ne ali so chala chu ya connected very good dana where bi we are connected to na bi luwa da no resume ke kene ka ya krenga ku bu ku ngor ko penku na chiro luel ke ta be luel be lewe or be dutin to wari nen kan rut gol pi wa jwal ra chi dab jal ku ka ja chinte go ke lotin so pet be nga be logo pur chi man wari en pur yi loboni chi man wari en pur yi mangali ti ba che kwat na che tari jal ben mi ka be dong nong ran ci lok to tin en kan ci wal ci lok jor ci tan to wena mana ke be be lok to ya we twi we cha ke ka mop we cha ke tong narin ke twi ku twi abrot kon ye lo yen cir ku lu wotin fa result ye kana abaga ting ni ko we chen gam wan gam war ci we chen gam yen nga no ka jwe ke lo ku ke tan fa we bi jonen good night ku be yo mi ate ta cir ka won yen gol we ye lo we cha ke mop ku bak nan good night ano bi dana ngo we yo mi ate bye now